Hello again. Let's continue the tales of Percy Peacock with Chapter 3, Percy's Second Adventure. It is 3 months later. Percy had been given a severe telling off following his tractor aerobatics incident, and he tried hard to behave himself. He was still inclined to wander off and explore, but he'd managed not to bring too much attention to himself. One of his favourite spots on the island was by the main house where the boats landed. Percy loved people, and to see them clambering off the boats and walking excitedly up to the entrance always gave him a lot of pleasure. He used to slip away and head for this spot when he thought Mummy and Daddy Peacock wouldn't miss him for an hour or so. As well as watching people arriving and departing from the island, he loved this place because he could gaze across the water at the magic land on the other side of the bay. He didn't know if it was actually a magic land, but it looked pretty exciting to him. He was determined that one day he would try and get across the bay, visit the land, and see for himself. He often used to imagine himself jumping off the boat onto the other side and having a good look round. If you're wondering why Percy didn't think about flying across, which lots of birds did, it was because peacocks can only fly very short distances, just a few metres. Percy knew this because he'd tried to fly many times. One warm sunny day, he thought he'd go down to the harbour and see what was happening. Both Mum and Dad were dozing in the warm sun, and he didn't think he'd be missed for a bit. He headed for the quayside at a fair old lickety-split. He needed to be fast because the quicker he got there, the more time he would have to enjoy himself. Peacocks, even young peacocks, can move surprisingly fast when they want to, and he was soon standing where the boats dock. He could see a boat on its way, which seemed to have lots of people on board, and he gave a little smile. All going well so far. When the boat arrived, lots of excited holiday makers got off, and he waved a wing in their general direction, occasionally, as a welcome. He heard a man say to the woman he was with, "Blimey, the National Trust have even trained the birds to make you feel welcome." When the people had all got off the boat, the man, who seemed to be the driver, got off as well and wandered up towards the buildings. Percy had a quick look around. Couldn't see anybody on board, so he thought this might be a good opportunity to take a closer look at things. He didn't want to bring any attention to himself, so he sauntered towards the boat, trying to look like he wasn't interested at all. When he was alongside, he had a quick look around to make sure no one was watching, and then jumped across the small gap onto the side of the boat. From there, it was another small jump onto a bench-type seat, and there he was. Woohoo! All aboard, Percy! It was all very exciting. He found a couple of jelly babies on the floor. He didn't know what they were, and ate them, and decided that peacocks definitely like jelly babies. He jumped back onto the seat so that he could see out, and cast a longing glance at the magic land across the water. As he gazed and his imagination ran wild about the adventures he would have on the other side, he became aware of a noise. He tried to think what it reminded him of. "I know," he thought. "It sounds like the noise the boat made when it sailed in." Percy was very pleased with himself for having worked that out. He continued to gaze out to sea, and after a couple of minutes, he began to realise that the magic land was getting closer. "That's strange," he thought. "Surely land masses don't move." And then, finally, the Percy penny dropped. It was the boat that was moving. He looked behind him, and sure enough, Brownsea Island appeared to be getting smaller. He looked around. There didn't seem to be anybody much on the boat, but then he worked out that it was still early and all the visitors were going to the island. It was too early for them to be coming back. "Well," he thought, "this is exciting. I didn't mean it to happen, but it has, and I can't do much about it, so let's make the most of it and enjoy it, Percy, my boy." He clambered back onto the seat at the front. The boat driver didn't seem to have noticed him, so he relaxed with the sea breeze blowing in his face and watched as the other side of the bay got closer and closer. He wondered what the people would look like in the magic land. In fact, as he began to be able to see a few people in the distance. He couldn't help thinking that they looked remarkably same as the people he'd seen on the island. Puzzling. In no time at all, the boat pulled into a jetty next to a brightly coloured yellow hut. There was a queue of people waiting to get onto the boat, and normally Percy would have gone to see them and say hello, but he thought perhaps a low profile on this occasion was a better plan. He waited until they started to let people onto the boat at the back, and then hopped onto the quayside off the front. He started to walk down the road. There were a lot of cars. They had cars on the island, but not very many. Here they were everywhere. He walked a little further, and then was surprised to see a very big boat, which seemed to be attached to two large chains. Interesting. He walked on a bit further still, and came to a large building where lots of people seemed to be looking out of the window, and quite a few of them were pointing at him. A few people came out and took photos of him. Wow, he thought, this is cool. I'm famous. Just as he was beginning to enjoy himself, a man came out carrying a broom. He approached Percy, waved the broom at him, and shouted, "Shoo!" Percy looked down. He thought, this is a bit strange, as he wasn't wearing any shoes. Again, the man shouted, "Shoo! Shoo!" Percy considered this for a moment, and then understood. The man was saying that you had to have shoes to be allowed in. Well, fair enough. Percy didn't have any shoes, so he decided he wouldn't go in. He turned round and headed back the way he came. The man was still shouting, "Shoo!" but Percy ignored him. This wasn't quite the magic land he'd expected, but he realised he hadn't seen that much of it. At that moment, he made two decisions. One, he needed to get back to Brownsea Island pretty smartish, or he suspected Mummy Peacock might have something to say about it. Two, he was going to come back and find out more about how it all worked over here in the magic land. "Right, Percy," he said, "let's get on that boat." He walked back the way he'd come, and the boat was moored by the bright yellow hut. He waited for his moment and hopped onto the front, immediately ducking down out of sight. A cheery voice from a man he couldn't see said, "Well, the young Peacock's back. Check his ticket, Bert." He heard two lots of laughter, but he kept very still and quiet during the short journey, in case they decided to throw him off the boat into the water. He didn't know if he could swim or not, but he suspected not. As they pulled into Brownsea Harbour, Percy got ready to get off or disembark, which is the proper word for getting off a boat. The driver and the other man gave him a cheery wave as he jumped off, and he waved a wing back. He guessed they'd known he was there all the time, on both journeys. Well, he thought, what an adventure. He made his way up the ramp and felt very good with life, until he saw who was waiting for him, with her wings folded. You guessed it, Mummy Peacock. Good luck, Percy.